I got it. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Happy Thursday. It's Thursday, April 15th. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Dr. Selma Bartholomew. Thank you for making time to join me for our Legacy Ed News this morning. I hope that you are off to enjoying your Thursday and certainly looking ahead to the weekend. But let's not rush. Let's just take it one day at a time. That is how we will get through this season and this pandemic and the throes of it that we continue to be in. I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk with you this morning. And so if you're new to the channel, thank you so much for making time to join me, and make sure you call a friend and call a family member and invite them to be a part of our Partner with Legacy community. So I'm excited. I'm Dr. B. Thank you so much for making time. And once again, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Help us to break the YouTube glass ceiling, okay? That's our goal. We want to break that YouTube glass ceiling. So welcome. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you today. So I always want to start off. Today I want to talk certainly about violence and the recent police shooting and the mass shootings within our schools and within our community. But I always like to start off first in terms of Legacy Ed News with giving you and getting you caught up in some of the news, both nationally as well as internationally. So first, congratulations to Kimberly Godwin. She became the first Black woman to lead a major news broadcast station, that's ABC News. So do send her a tweet and let her know that we offer her congratulations on this historical moment. It's 2001, and this is their first Black woman to lead a news broadcast station. I want to do some piece also international news. So if you haven't been watching Brazil, they have had massive protests and around the fact that the government has announced major budget cuts in education. And what was interesting about this is that the president of Brazil, he took to Twitter and he wrote that Brazilian teachers should involve in teaching and not brainwashing their students. And he even went further and encouraged students to videotape, that's right, to videotape their teachers. And he wanted them to videotape any teacher who he or that child suspects putting leftist ideas forwards. In other words, anyone who he believes is against him and against his presidency, students he encouraged to videotape. And so let's keep a close eye on Brazil, as we know they are also dealing with the pandemic. It is a global issue. Congratulations again to our first African-American female chancellor for the New York City Department of Education, Chancellor Misha Porter. And she recently announced that she would like to see summer school open to all students, not just students who are failing behind academically. She noted that this season has helped us to reevaluate standardized testing, its purpose, as well as reckoning with segregation by race and academic performance within New York City schools. So let me know what you think. If you're a teacher, if you're a principal in this in New York City, put a comment in the chat. Let me know how you are feeling about having summer school for all students. Now, we didn't say we have the capacity for it, right? So I have to raise that question. Honestly, most of our schools really struggle with summer school because teachers are not, in reality, how a teacher and how we get paid, most teachers get paid is, even though they are on salary for the year, they usually just say it's a 10-month position. It's a 10-month position. So they distribute their salary over 12 months, but in reality, it is a 10-month position. So the question we need to be asking is, who will be educating our children then in summer school? Will it be substitutes? Who's going to be doing this, this lifting, and what opportunities will there be for enrichment and to give our children the social and emotional health and wellness support that they need as they come out of the pandemic? Another congratulations to our News One reporter and also educator, Cheryl Wills. She recently announced that her book, Emma, which is a story of her great-grandmother, will be released. And so you can find it. Once again, the title is Emma. And so congratulations to Cheryl Wills. Once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. This is Dr. B. This is Legacy Ed News. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I wanted to spend some time this morning. I think we are all heart-wrenched and in pain around the recent police shooting of the 20-year-old young man, Dante Wright. Recently, yes, police officer Kim Potter did notified that she has resigned after fatally shooting this 20-year-old young man, noting that she thought that it was a taser, that she was tasering him. And sadly, he has lost his life as a result of this police shooting. We also know that we saw recent shootings, another mass shooting in Knoxville, Tennessee, another school shooting. In 2019, there were over 25 school shootings. And so certainly we, as a result of the pandemic and our children not being in schools, maybe we didn't see such a large number, but this question of violence is what I want to talk to and have an open discussion with us today. So first, my condolences go out to the Wright family, and just know that we are keeping you in our hearts and in our prayers. But as we think about this violence, I don't think that we fully understand how prevalent violence is within our schools and violence against our children. And so between 1999 and 2017, get ready for this number, there were nearly 39,000 gun-related deaths amongst our children between the ages of 5 and 18. That's right, 39,000 gun-related deaths. And that includes deaths from assaults, from suicide, unintentional reasons, and then some things that were just undetermined. So as we think about this violence that our children are experiencing, I wanted to just stop a minute today and to have that discussion. And when we look at that violence, we know that the prevalence of the issues around violence and gang violence and the death of our children, it is happening in Black and Brown communities, primarily with our boys. And so if you look at that data, more than 40% of those 39,000 deaths were Black and Brown children. I went back even a little bit further for us to have this context and this discussion today. So I looked at some of the data. It says that since 1963, before I give you the number, I'm going to give you an example. Consider the Vietnam War. So in the Vietnam War, we lost about 58,000 soldiers. And so that means since 1963 to today, we have lost over 186,000 children and teens that have been killed with guns in this country. So I wanted to first, take a breath and consider this state that we're in. And it's certainly not just current state, right? When you look at those numbers from 1963, it's not new. It feels more overwhelming, certainly because of social media, because we can turn on the TV and we can get news instantly with our phones and on our social media platforms. But for me, I wanted us to just stop a minute and realize that this is not new. So I want to have a moment to reflect on what fuels it, So I'm mindful of Gandhi's work and Dr. King's work, which certainly speaks to nonviolence protests. But what we often don't talk about or don't do enough reflecting on is that Gandhi's work was about ending passive violence. And he spoke about the fact that passive violence is daily. And it was passive violence that fuels the physical violence. So what does he mean by passive violence? Well, in the smallest form, it could be, you walk by your neighbor and you don't say good morning, right? Even though you know that that's your neighbor. So you ignore that person. You just let me just keep it moving. So on behalf of our children right now who turn on the television and who see the murder of a young Black male, and this is not the first one, we are in the midst of the trial of George Floyd, what they're processing and what they're telling us, right? And what they're processing in their little minds, in their young and development minds, is this violence against them. It may not be physical. In other words, they weren't the one who were physically shot or hit, but it becomes internalized. It becomes internalized. So when we begin to see all of these images and we begin to feel it, it becomes passive violence against our children and against our community. I'm a mom and I have a hard time watching those videos. So if you're a parent right now, I guess first stop and don't let the news and the news reporters be the filter for you. Take a moment and sit down with your son, sit down with your daughter and your child, your niece, your grandchild, and to have some honest conversations about how do they feel? How do they feel about what is happening? Because it does fuel anger, right? And so when we have that passive violence and the anger is fueled, you end up, right? You end up hitting again. You end up being responsive to violence with other violence. But the passive violence is also about our curriculum. It's also about our curriculum. And within our schools, we've been advocating and asking for culturally relevant curriculum. And I think that most people just think it's a curriculum, okay, give it to Black and brown kids. Let Black and brown kids alone read about, people of historical figures. And so it's not about that. It's really about re-examining the messages that we send to all children, because certainly our police officers, right, they go through school, they graduate and they become police officers, but they've been marinated in a culture that has sent messages of hate and messages of fear around people of color, and in particular, Black men. So we can't just say the solution is reimagining policing. And I said that because I got so many messages this week, which is why I decided I wanted to have this talk, where people were saying to me, hey, Dr. B, we need to reimagine policing. This is certainly, yes, it is a policing issue and there are policies, but there's some deep rooted things that we need to look at. And so the first piece is we need to reimagine leadership. This is a leadership crisis that we are in within the police department and within these agencies, because it starts from the top. It's a messaging in terms of what kind of support do you give to your police? What discussions are you having with them on a daily basis? What training have they had? And what are those discussions and what are those relationships that you as the leader has said that it's important? How do you talk to young men? How do you talk to our children of color? How do you show patience to them? As we work with children, and even as you saw that video, there's just a disconnect that there's no space for someone to be able to have a conversation. And do you see that he was a baby, 20 years old? You're not a man, you're a young man, not even old, right? 21. It's not yet even 21. So this to me is not a question of reimagining policing. It's a question of reimagining leadership, and the leadership that we have across our communities, not in our police departments, the leadership we have in our schools, the leadership we have in our political offices, because now it requires a level of planning and a level of understanding about how do you go about changing cultures? How do you go about changing mindsets? Because the passive violence has been built up with a curriculum, built up with images and messages of how people should relate to people of color, in particular young men of color. And it didn't just happen overnight. And so as we see these shootings and we see this evidence of the physical violence, it did not happen overnight. It is entrenched, and it is being fueled by passive violence, by us certainly turning the eye when we see someone hurt. And so as we talk today about even acts of hate in the Asian community, everyone is, it is absolutely disgraceful, but it didn't happen overnight. Certainly we can, look at a curriculum and we can say, where are those places that people get to know each other, get to respect each other, get to care for each other? And also, how do you see young men of color, and where do you see them? So it's so important to consider the impact, and when we look at this, the deep-rooted issue around the training of a police, of our policing. 6 months in an academy, a year in an academy? No, you came in with certain mindsets, and 6 months in an academy is not going to break your entrenched and ingrained beliefs and your fear of young men of color. It doesn't happen over 6 months. They came into, right? They went through a school system. They are in the news. They're out in society, and they see these images, and they've been told of these images of young men, and in particular Black men. And so will 6 months in an academy, right, get you to rethink and to change how you view a person? So yes, it matters, the training. However, I'm saying to you that this level of violence, it didn't happen overnight. It has been fueled. Let me know what you think. If you're listening right now, put a comment in the chat. And you can also, I always get text messages from those within my network as well. And as we look at passive violence in our community, I want to also, let me just also remind you to, and invite you to be a part of our Dr. Selma B show on Sunday in Manhattan Neighborhood Network. It airs, we release it on our channel at 10:30 a.m. this coming Sunday, April 18th. So I want to say thank you for joining me for our Legacy Ed News this morning. I try to keep it nice and tight to just get you the most trending and current and up-to-date news. And as you look at what's happening around our community today, around the police shootings, around the mass shootings, my brief discussion with you today is to not just look at it as one act, but to really look at it systemically as a community, and to look at those acts and say, how did we get here? And so for me, I want to have a continued conversation about how do we end the passive violence? How do we end those things that are contributing to that violence? And I think it goes right to curriculum. And I don't want to just reimagine policing. I want to reimagine leadership within our community. And what does it mean to lead? What does it mean to have a vision for the future, for your organization, but more importantly, also for community? And I also usually talk about the economic implications of this as well, because it is also passive violence, that the lack of jobs, the lack of opportunity, and how, once again, our people of color are viewed and seen. And I'm going to close with that, because I know, for example, our recent Mayor Bill de Blasio, he just announced that they've got 5,000 jobs, 5,000 summer jobs to clean the streets of New York. Yes, it does need cleaning. And I'm always advocating with the members of my community, but I would have enjoyed it, or I guess I would have valued it, if he also came up and said, well, we'll clean the streets, but we also have a broader vision for work. See, the passive violence, clean the streets, but there's nothing else. So there's nothing higher level in terms of offering people true opportunities to lift themselves out of poverty, to lift themselves out of the conditions. And so the view of how you see individuals is entrenched, and it is low skill jobs. It's not being able to see the value of a person and the dignity in a person. So, which has been stripped as a result of our curriculum and a result of the sustained passive violence against individuals of color and communities of color in this country. I thank you for making time. Yes, we will be back next week. So let me just run the calendar by you. Sunday, April 18th, it's the Dr. Selma B show. The topic is the power of networking. So if you want to learn about networking, but more importantly, we continue to learn and grow together on the Dr. Selma B show, please join me Sunday, April 18th. On the April 22nd, our next webinar is on leadership. So this is a preface to that conversation. And the topic is transformational leadership. Transformational leadership. And what do we need to do to transform our community and to transform our schools? Once again, thank you. Before I end, like and subscribe to the channel. Help me to break the YouTube glass ceiling. And finally, I want to wish you a wonderful day, and please stay encouraged and let me know what you think. about this issue of violence, police shootings and mass shootings. And do you agree that it's passive violence? And if not, then tell me what it is that you've been grappling with as you watch the news. And moms and dads, final note, don't let your children watch by themselves. Stop and be a filter for them, and to have those conversations with you rather than the news and everybody else having those conversations with our children, okay? I'm wishing you well, and till Sunday and next week, please continue to stay safe. And saying thanks is not the same as giving thanks, and I give thanks for you.